All right. So, I just want to dive into the physicality of this part because that must have been probably the most difficult challenge, the limitations that were placed on you as an actor. So there were prosthetic solutions and physical solutions, and I wondered if you could also address a little bit of what polio actually does to a body and what you had to give us a sense of.
Yeah. Let's see. There were no real prosthetics per se, and no body double. It's mentioned in the script that Mark's spine was horribly curved, so much so that he, hadn't seen his genitals in 30 years. Helen Hunt's character, Cheryl Cohen Green, in the film script, speaks to that as well when she's making notes about their sessions. So in order to sort of duplicate that, I worked with the props people, and we came up with the solution of a foam-sized, soccer ball-sized piece of foam that I would place under the left side of my back midway down, just to give my body a curve. And that was I guess a good jumping off point physically, and then just trying to figure out how to be still. Mark was paralyzed, but not in the typical sense. He had sensation, he had feeling.
He
just was
numb.
unable to move other than a toe and a couple, a toe or fingers, those kinds of things, a little tiny bit, not even enough to be able to work a wheelchair, though he was unable to be upright because it hurt a lot. But he really couldn't. He didn't have enough strength to be able to do really anything but move his head 90 degrees. So part of what I tried to learn was I made, before the film, a mouth stick at home, approximating the one I'd seen in a documentary about him. I just tried to learn to type and to dial the phone and turn pages of a book and things like that. Harder than it looks. But a lot of my cues came from Jessica Yu's really amazing documentary short about Mark's life made in the 90s called Breathing Lessons.
You had seen that one before. You were familiar with the story.
I was familiar with the story. I hadn't seen the short. I don't really watch the Academy Awards, but I remember hearing about her speech because it was charming. So I think she said something to the effect that the dress that they've loaned me for this evening is larger. It costs more than the budget of my film.
That was
she
her.
said something like that. Yeah, so that was really an invaluable tool I had at my disposal, and I watched it over and over.
Because he was gone.
Yes, Mark's been gone for several years, and I like to be specific, and that was a really great way to be specific. Was to really model the performance after what I'd seen in that film. There's also a wealth of his writing available. I read all that I could: poetry, articles, stories, things like that.
I felt like his voice really came through and animated the movie, made it very vibrant and funny.
I hope so. We were searching for humor at every turn. Someone described this film to me. I don't think I'd be interested in seeing it, to be honest. But I love the movie, and I think a lot of people go into it expecting something that it isn't, expecting it to be really, really dark, really introspective, and it's got those elements, but it has really a lot of humor, a lot of mirth, and a lot of laughs ultimately.
Well, he's a hero in the sense that he's very brave, and he's very strong.
I guess so. He always resented when people would call disabled people, or him, and other disabled people, brave, because he had a strong sense of humor, and he had anger in him. And I know that when I first met Ben Lewin, the writer and director of the piece, I had several concerns. He had several concerns. Among his was that Mark O'Brien not be Saint Mark O'Brien, and that he be a warts and all person who could be a real shit and could be, a jerk. And I think that's really refreshing take on a human being that isn't just one thing.
You don't think
being
it was
disabled
brave
makes
to...
you good or bad. I think he was, but he never enjoyed that term. I think that it felt condescending to him in a way somehow.
Well, I guess in the sense that he wanted to experience sexuality and make love and all of that, and he you know, had to take it was presumably embarrassing and humbling and anguishing until he got the hang of it.
It's true, and I think that he saw sex not as an end to itself, but something he wanted to explore in the bigger picture of falling in love and trying to have a life with someone. And if he was able to do that, and I think that Mark was a pretty easy person to love for his mind, but he wanted to offer kind of more than that if he could.
And so Helen Hunt's character, Cheryl, the sex therapist, is that the right
actually,
term?
She's a surrogate partner. Ultimately, Mark called her a sex surrogate. She likes the term surrogate partner at all because a lot of her work isn't about sex per se. And actually, the therapist you mentioned, a therapist is needed legally to refer a patient like Mark to the surrogate. So the surrogate isn't exactly a therapist, although is a sort of therapist and makes notes on the sessions they have and tries to just open a person up to their possibilities, I guess.
So anytime the two actors have to get very close and naked and intimate in any kind of filming scene is tricky and difficult for anyone. I wondered if you could talk about the challenges that you two faced in this situation and how Ben helped you to get it across.
Yes, Helen and I and Ben just kind of went through the scenes in detail, doing the things that actors and a director would normally do, which is figure out what is the story here, how can we best tell the story, or a line that might bother one of the actors, or a line that the writer-director has never really liked and wonders if there's a better choice. You know, just the basic kind of nuts and bolts, taking apart the scene. As far as shooting it, our time on screen begins with a love scene, as our first or a sex scene, or however you want to look at it, our first moments, our first scene, and it's a long scene shot mostly in real time of our first encounter. I don't think it was a conscious choice, but Helen and I didn't make an attempt to get very chummy, rather to have a sense of distance, wonder about each other, an awkwardness from not really being totally comfortable and knowing that person. Love scenes in movies are generally kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and I think that for our love scenes, which were supposed to be awkward and uncomfortable, that was ideal.